Namaste and welcome to the Vedanta Society of Greater Houston and our Bhagavad Gita class. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Gratitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Ritavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Amba Tvam Anusandadhami Bhagavad Gita Bhavadveshinim Vasudeva Sutan Devam Kamsa Chanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langhayate Girim Yatkripatamaham Vande Paramananda Madhavam. Om, O Mother Bhagavad Gita, we meditate on you who were made known to Partha, Arjuna, by the Lord Narayana himself. You who were included in the Mahabharata by the ancient sage Vyasa. You, the goddess, who rains down the nectar of Advaita, non-dualism, in 18 chapters. You, the destroyer of relative existence. We worship Krishna, world teacher, the son of Vasudeva, the supreme delight of his mother Devaki, and the destroyer of the demons Kamsa and Chanura. We adore that supremely blissful Madhava, Krishna, by whose grace the mute are made eloquent and the lame are enabled to cross over mountains. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat. Om peace, peace, peace be unto us all. So tonight we are to take up chapter 17 of the Gita. Last time we completed our reading of the 16th chapter. And the 16th chapter again dealt with the divine and demonic qualities as manifested in human beings. And it ended on the note that 24th verse says, just the English translation I'll give, therefore the scripture is your authority, Sri Krishna tells Arjuna. Therefore the scripture is your authority in the matter of determining what is to be done and what is not to be done. After understanding actions as presented by the scriptural instructions, you ought to perform your duty here. So now that statement about the scriptures being the source of knowledge about what is to be done and what is not to be done, that gives rise to a question in Arjuna's mind. And that is the way the chapter 17 begins. As you will know, various of the chapters, not all of them, but various of the chapters in the Gita begin with questions or doubts by Arjuna. And so this is one more of these. And this is the chapter on the three types of faith. That is tamasic faith, rajasic faith, sattvic faith. As I said, when we were on chapter, was it 13 or 14? I forget now, but which dealt with the gunas. I said at that time, let's see, field in the north, no, it would be 14, chapter 14, the three gunas of Prakriti. At that time, that there was another chapter coming that would deal in more detail with the three gunas. And so that is this chapter. This is the penultimate chapter, next to the last chapter in the Gita. And so it's on the exposition of the three forms of faith. The tamasic, that is the faith of a person who is very dull, who is ignorant, who is of low character, destructive, etc. And then the faith of a person who is rajasic, a person who is proud, who may be haughty, who is passionate, who is active, egotistical, etc. And the faith of one who is sattvic, the person whose mind is stable, the person whose mind is tranquil, the person whose mind is clear, and who does that which needs to be done at the proper time and in the proper way. So this is an exposition of these three types of faith. So again, in the last verse of the 16th chapter, Sri Krishna says that that it's faith in the scriptures, that is faith in the wisdom of the scriptures, that the scriptures say what they say for our own good. It's that faith which allows us to follow the advice of the scriptures and know that which is to be done and that which is not to be done in life. And so then Arjuna asks, Arjuna vacha ye shastra vidhimutsrujya yajante shraddhayanvitaha tesham nishtha tu ka Krishna sattvamaho rajastamaha. So this says, hey Krishna, O Krishna, what is the steadfastness of those who, imbued with faith, adore by ignoring the instructions of the scriptures? That's a very poor construction. I'll come back and try to redo it according to the Sanskrit. Is it born of sattva or of rajas or of tamas? The question is, what about those people who ignore the instructions of the scriptures? Is their faith of a sattvic nature, a rajasic nature, or tamasic nature? Well, the answer to that would be fairly obvious. That is certain, at least part of it is certainly not sattvic. So ye shastra vidhimutsrujya, those having ignored the advice of the scriptures, the injunctions of the scriptures, yajante shraddhayanvitaha, who worship endowed with faith. That is, those who worship with faith, worship but ignoring the injunctions of the scriptures. Tesham nishtha tu ka Krishna. What is their nishtha? What is their conviction? What is their firm conviction? Sattvamaho rajastamaha. Is it called sattvic or rajasic or tamasic? So a person who worships with faith, but who ignores the scriptures, what kind of faith is this? And so, of course, he's not talking about bad people. He's asking about people who, in their own way, are sincere and who try to do the right thing. So before coming to Sri Krishna's answer, let me say a word about the background here, because that is always important in understanding an ancient scripture. There are 4 types of discernment, or what we usually call discrimination in Vedanta. I always hesitate to use the term discrimination, which is the usually preferred term for translating viveka, discrimination, like Swami Vivekananda, he who's the bliss of discrimination. Because in modern times, discrimination is used for things like racial discrimination, ethnic discrimination, wealth discrimination, where you give preference to wealthy people and you ignore poor people, etc. So discrimination in its root, of course, is fine. The meaning of discrimination is to analyze and to determine according to category. But again, in present-day English usage, especially in America, it has been used almost exclusively in terms of bad discrimination. That is, categorizing people and then treating them with difference, a prejudicial difference, because we don't like one group and we like another more. So discernment is a word which doesn't have that contextual baggage. But either word in its root meaning is fine, and the root meaning they're fairly equivalent. So again, I tend to default to discrimination just because that's what has been used so much in English Vedantic texts, but sometimes I catch myself and use discernment instead. So if I go back and forth between these terms, know that I'm speaking of the same thing. So in Vedanta, we speak a great deal about viveka, discernment or discrimination. And usually when we're talking about discrimination in Vedanta, we're talking about discrimination between the real and the unreal. That is, between the spirit, God or self, and the unreal. That is, the appearance of things which come and go. Everything here comes and goes. And Vedanta says that which comes and goes, which didn't exist in the beginning and won't exist in the end, it doesn't really exist in the present. It's just an appearance. It's just an appearance. And so discrimination between the real and the unreal, or as Sri Ramakrishna said, and which is more accurate, discrimination between the eternal and the play of the Divine Mother, as he would call it, the Nitya and the Lila. The Nitya, the eternal, that is the unchanging spirit, the unchanging Atman, the unchanging God. And the Lila, that is all of this manifestation, the manifestation conceived of as the play of God or the play of the Divine Mother or the dance of Shiva. That all of this is just constant activity of appearance, but that behind this, right here, and this is right here where we're perceiving this universe, right here is the reality. But instead of seeing that, we're seeing all of this manifestation. And so discrimination is often used for those two. But actually, there are 4 types of Vedantic discrimination which we should know. And the most basic is what is dealt with here. And that is in Sanskrit, for those of you who have some Sanskrit background, karya viveka, discrimination between what should be done, karya, and what should not be done, akarya. Karya viveka, karya viveka. Discrimination between what should be done and what should not be done. That's the most basic form of discrimination. As many of you know who have studied some Vedanta, Vedanta teaches that the goal of life is not to be a good person. That doesn't mean the goal of life is to be a bad person. And it doesn't mean that there's no difference between a good person and a bad person. It means that the goal of life is far beyond just being a good person. But you can't become a spiritual person until you have first become a good person. And so goodness has its place, morality has its critical place in Vedanta as the first step. So the first step in spiritual life, recognized in Christianity, recognized in Judaism, recognized in Islam, recognized in Buddhism, recognized in Jainism, recognized in Sikhism, recognized in Taoism, in all of the traditions, as well as Hinduism, all forms of Hinduism, recognized that morality is the first step in spiritual life. In the Christian tradition, they divide spiritual life into 3 large stages. Each stage is quite large with steps within it. But the first is via purgativa, the path of purgation, or that is, it means the path of purification. Path of purification. So that means becoming a deeply good person, a deeply good, pure-hearted person. And then comes the via illuminativa, the path of illumination, or the path of growing spiritual experience. And then finally, via unitiva, the path of unity, where one becomes united with God. Only in Christianity, they don't believe that you can unite your being with God. You just unite your will with the will of God. But of course, in Vedanta, we say that we don't even need to unify ourselves with God. We are already God. We just have to remember it. And so other than that, the path is very beautiful. The path of purification, the path of illumination, and the path of unity, which for us would mean recognizing that unity and experiencing it directly. In Buddhism, In Mahayana Buddhism, Theravada has a similar idea, but they delineate it a little differently. But in Mahayana, they speak of the 6 paramitas, the 6 perfections. Later, they went to 10 perfections, but actually that was, in my opinion, a great weakening of Buddhism. There wasn't a need for 10. 6 was all that they needed. 10 was an unnecessary complication which was removed from direct experience. It was when people had become too conceptual in Buddhism and too removed from experience. But in the original 6 paramitas of Mahayana Buddhism, as taught in the Prajna Paramita scriptures, the scriptures called the Prajna Paramita, the supreme excellence of wisdom. The first 2 steps are dana and shila. Dana means charity. That is, you begin your spiritual life by becoming charitable. You begin your spiritual life by acts of unselfishness, removing that barrier which we all have that says, I'm important, more important than anybody else. My needs come first. I come first. Who cares what happens to other people? If I have to step on other people to get ahead, then I'll step on other people to get ahead. It doesn't matter. So first, dana. That also is part of purification. But then the next is shila, which means moral development. And so first unselfishness, then moral development. And those 2 go together. So there you see the same thing, that you begin by what should be done and what should not be done. That is, at the level of human behavior. Because many of our problems in life come because of our habitual patterns of behavior. Our problems come from most of our problems in life and in spiritual life come from habitual habits of behavior and habits of thought. And so those are the 2 areas where most attention is given in developing a spiritual life. The high flights of spiritual life, those are taken care of later. But first we need to change our habits of life and our habits of behavior and our habits of thought. And so to change our habits of behavior first, because behavior, of course, is a reflection of thought. And so the 2 go together. But we have to change our habits of behavior, because even when we know something to be wrong and something that's harmful to me or harmful to other people, and I don't really want to harm, when I've come to the point where I don't really want to harm other people and I don't want to harm myself, still I can't stop myself from patterns of behavior because the habit is there. It's like the last time I rode a horse. I was trained at horse riding, English-style horse riding as a teenager, extensive training. But then after joining the monastery, I never had a chance to ride a horse until I was in my early 40s, I guess, or mid-40s, and I went to Mexico. And there, while I was there, I saw an opportunity to rent a horse to go for a ride along the beach in San Felipe in the Gulf of California. So I thought, oh, that sounds great. I haven't been riding for decades. I'd love to go riding. So I rented the horse. But of course, it was a rent-a-nag was the actual service. That's not the name of it, but that's what it was renting a nag. And so it was an old abused horse that had been ridden by many people who didn't know how to ride, and extremely stubborn and untrainable. And so I got on it and got out of the stable and went out to the beach. But then the horse suddenly decided, no, I want to go home. I don't want to do this. And so no matter what I did, the horse was going to go back home. And so like that, our patterns are so fixed in life that we, the rider within this horse of the body, we try to guide it to what it should do, but the body and lower mind says, no, I want to do what I've always done. I'm going back to my usual place. And so we find ourselves just going like that no matter what we tell ourselves. So we have to first know what is to be done, and then we gradually, with infinite patience and infinite perseverance, we have to retrain ourselves without getting frustrated at all of our failures. Swami Vivekananda said, if it weren't for the failures of life, what would we be? We should bless our failures, not so that we keep failing, but because we learn from them. And it's only by working through failure, repeated failure, that eventually we come right. And so if you want to change your behavior and you're having trouble, you're in very good company, because you're in the company of all of us, all of humanity. So it's with perseverance and patience, again and again, trying to nudge the horse into a new path. It doesn't want to go, it fights, but eventually, if you keep nudging, one day it's going to begin to move in the other direction, and finally it will form a habit in that direction. So karya viveka, learning to discriminate between what should be done and what should not be done. So Sri Krishna said in the previous chapter that is learned from the scriptures. And of course, in Hinduism, scripture is taken in a very large sense, including the words of realized souls. Not the words of everybody who claims to be realized, because there are plenty of those today who claim to be realized who haven't realized. Some of them are good people, but they just make more claims about themselves than they should, because they want to have a following, and that's the only way they can get a following. And so I've known some of these people, people who have very big names. And some of them that I've seen were not bad people, but they became hypocrites because they wanted followers, they wanted disciples. So they write in their books, autobiographies, about the first time they had nirvikalpa samadhi. And I've met such people, and they've never had even the lower kind of samadhi. Again, not bad people, but they become hypocrites because they're promoting themselves. So not that kind of people, but a person who has actually had liberating spiritual experience or high spiritual experience, then their words also become scriptures. And so we learn it from the scriptures and from the words of the wise, which are as good as scriptures. In Vedanta, it said that there are three principles that any instruction has to meet before we should follow it. One, it should be in tune with the scriptures. That is, it shouldn't contradict the highest teachings of the scriptures. Of course, something like the Vedas or the Tantras or the Puranas, they have everything from the highest to the lowest. But that which tradition has recognized as the highest teachings, the basic principles of truth, an instruction we get should not contradict that. It should not contradict the essence of the scriptures. It should not be contrary to reason. It shouldn't be unreasonable. Spiritual truth is higher than reason, but it's not, as Swami Vivekananda insisted over and over again, it's not contrary to reason. It's higher than reason, beyond the reach of reason, but it's not irrational. And so it should be in tune with the essence of the scriptures. It should be reasonable, and it should conform to experience, higher spiritual experience. And so if it meets those three things, then we can follow it. So let me mention the other three types, though they're not pertinent right here, but just to complete the thought. The second type of discrimination or discernment is drishya viveka, discrimination between the seer and the seen. Some of you will know that there's a text written called Drishya Viveka. It's on this practice, or at least the beginning part of it is on this practice. And those of you who look at Swami Sarvapriyananda's classes, as many of you do, will know that he often speaks about this text, Drishya Viveka, and the practice it promotes. That is, that I am this experiencer, I am the light of experience. which experiences the world around me. This is object, and I am the seer. I am the subject, and this is the object of my experience. But I see this body. I feel this body. I see this body. I experience this body as an object. And so I am the seer, and the body is the object of my experience. And I see my own thoughts. I see mental processes as objects. And so I am the seer, and the mind itself is an object. So I am neither physical nor mental. I am the light of pure consciousness which illuminates all of that. So that is the process of Drigdrishya Viveka, discrimination between the seer, the subject of experience, and the seen, the object, including this body and mind. Then comes, as I said before, so I don't need to explain these other two, discrimination between the eternal and the non-eternal. We haven't experienced the eternal, but we know what non-eternal means, and that we see everything is non-eternal. So we know what is not eternal. And so on that basis, we can discriminate between the two. And the fourth type, again, is Sarasad Viveka, discrimination between the real and the unreal. That we can't do until we are highly advanced, because we don't have any experience of anything but this, the unreal, which is said to be unreal. And this for us is real right now. We take it for real. We act as if it were real. And so we have no basis really for discriminating between the real and the unreal. And that's why Sri Ramakrishna, as I said earlier, often spoke instead of discriminating between the eternal and the non-eternal, because that we can do. As we can do discrimination between the seer and the seen, because I am the seer, and I can see that everything appears to me as object, so I must be the subject. And of course, coming back to the subject now, we can understand discrimination between what should be done and what should not be done. Karya Karya Viveka. So that is the question of Arjuna. Oh Krishna, what is that faith of those who are imbued with faith follow the scriptures? I'm sorry. The translation is so bad here that I'm trying to redo it, and I'm making a bigger mess of it. So Krishna, what is the conviction of those who worship with faith but ignore the injunctions of the scriptures? Is it sattvic? Is it rajasic? Is it tamasic? And again, just to give an idea of what kind of person he may be speaking of, he's speaking of a sincere person, a person imbued with faith who actually worships, but doesn't do it according to the injunctions of the scriptures. And so that could be a person of another tradition, or a person who is ignorant, who doesn't know the scriptures, etc. So then we come to verse 2. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Trividha Bhavati Shraddha Dehinam Sa Swabhavajaha Sattviki Rajasi Chaiva Tamasi Cheti Tam Shrinu. So Trividha Bhavati Shraddha. Shraddha, faith, is of three types. Trividha is of three types. Dehinam Sa Dehinam Swabhavaja. That is three types of faith among the embodied beings, according to their nature, their swabhava, their own nature, which is according to their own nature. Sattviki, that which is sattvic; rajasi, that which is rajasic; and tamasi, that which is tamasic. Cheti tam shrinu. Listen to me as I describe the sattvic faith, rajasic faith, tamasic faith. And very briefly, because probably all of you, or certainly the great majority of you, know the three gunas very well, so I don't want to bore you by explaining them. But again, these three gunas, just for those who may be coming to the subject anew, the three gunas are the three basic qualities which explain all of the diversity here in the universe. Just as in Chinese thought, they have yin and yang, a dichotomy of forces which explain the dynamic nature of the universe. In Indian thought, there are three forces. The sattvic is the state of equilibrium, the state, well, let me start with tamasic, tamas, that which is the lowest. Tamas is the quality, tamasic is the adjective, that which has tamas. So tamas is the lowest, that which is dark, ignorant, destructive, inert, etc. And the second is rajas, or rajasic as the adjective. Rajas means the quality of passion and action and reaction, which includes egotism and the negative emotions of jealousy and envy and strong desire, strong likes and dislikes, and so forth. And then the third is sattvic, or sattva, the adjective sattvic, the state of equanimity, of calmness, of tranquility, the state of mind that we try to cultivate in order to attain to spiritual experience. So we start, but that also eventually we have to transcend to come to freedom. But first we have to establish it to get clarity of mind so that we can perceive the truth and then go beyond even that. So tamas, we overcome that by rajas. That is, when we find ourselves full of inertia, laziness, sleepiness, and so forth, except when it's time to go to bed, of course. That comes to all of us. But otherwise, we inspire ourselves with rajas, activity, the desire to do, in order to get over that inert state of tamas. But then rajas burns itself out. And so we calm rajas by moving up to sattva, which is higher activity. That is activity which is not passionate, which is not big waves going up and going down, but tranquility, but a highly awakened tranquility. So that faith, Sri Krishna says, of the embodied ones, of embodied beings, which is born of their own nature, is verily threefold, possessed of sattva, rajas, and tamas. Hear about it. So then verse 3 we come to. Just a moment. Sattvanurupa sarvasya shraddha bhavati bharata. Shraddha yam purusho yo yat shraddha sa eva saha. So sattvanurupa sarvasya shraddha bhavati bharata. So the sattvanurupa means according to the sattva. That is, here it doesn't mean the guna, the quality of sattva, as opposed to the other two. Sattva here has the meaning of the mind, the internal mind, because that is the most sattvic part of our being. The body is the tamasic part of our being. The mind is the sattvic, that which reflects intelligence. And so in accordance with the mind of all beings, sarvasya, their faith is according to the nature of their minds, is the meaning here. And then shraddha mayo yam purusho yo yat shraddha sa eva sa. So shraddha mayo yam purusha, the person is made of their faith. Here it doesn't mean, it's not as a philosophical statement of the or a metaphysical state, or an ontological statement, I should say, about what the material they're made out of. It means that as is your faith, so are you as a person. As the famous saying says, I've tried to find the source of it and I can't find it. I've searched for it, not recently, but long back I was looking for it. As a man thinketh. In fact, at the turn of the 19th to 20th century, sometime around there, someone wrote a small book called As a Man Thinketh. But it's a famous statement, and I don't know where it originally comes from. But so this person is made of faith as the dominant factor. That is, a person is according to their faith. All that you do, your actions, your thoughts, your aspirations, everything follows from the faith that you have, the type of faith that you have. Yat shraddha sa eva sa, yo yat shraddha sa eva sa. Whatever faith you have, verily that you are. So the running translation, O scion of the Bharata dynasty, that is, O Bharata, the faith of all creatures is formed in accordance with their internal organ, in accordance with their mind. The person is made of faith as the dominant factor. That is, faith is the most important component you have. Whatever faith one has, one is verily that. So here it's talking about the importance of faith. So let's talk a little bit about faith, the nature of faith, what it is, and why it's so important. There is faith and there is faith. And that's why he's going to talk about the three types of faith, sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. There is the faith of the person who is too lazy to think about anything. People say that this is the nature of things, and so I just passively accept it because I don't want to think anything. And so sort of the lazy man's faith. I remember when I was a kid, people would, even people in church would joke about faith, saying that, well, I don't know really whether there is a God or not, but I figure if there's not a God and I believe in it, when I die, I'm going to die anyway, and so it doesn't matter that I believed in God, even if there is none. But if there is a God and I don't believe in God and I die, then I'm going to go to hell. So as an insurance policy, I believe in God. That's no belief. It may be a humorous statement that people like to make, but it doesn't speak of much faith, that you're hedging your bets. And so maybe there is no God, but I'm going to say that I believe in God just so that when I die, I'll go to heaven, as if it were that easy to attain to the highest blessing of life just because you hedged your bets. So that's not faith at all. There are people, of course, who have no faith, and then there are people who have a strong faith. But the absence of faith in spiritual things doesn't necessarily mean that the person is a low person. Many of us went through periods of atheism or agnosticism. The direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, some of them went through periods of atheism, agnosticism, Swami Vivekananda himself. So that can be a sign of a person's sincerity, because they're looking and they're not accepting things just because somebody has told them. So don't judge people who don't believe in spiritual things. It may be in time that they will come around. Some people don't believe in spiritual things because they're lazy and they don't want to believe in it because it seems to entail some responsibility, some moral responsibility, and responsibility to act in a right way. And who wants to do that? I'd rather just party and have a good time and not worry about what I should and shouldn't do. I don't want people telling me what I should and shouldn't do, and I don't want a book telling me what I should and shouldn't do. So they don't have faith because it's a bother. There are other people, they don't have faith because they've thought about things, and they see that there's no good reason that they can find for believing. And that's a good thing. That's a positive thing. There's some people who, from their childhood itself, they just have a natural faith in God. That, Sri Ramakrishna said, that's the fruit of many lifetimes of spiritual practice. That if from childhood you just accept the reality of God, not in the tamasic way, not in the way of just I'm too lazy to think about it and who cares, I'll just accept what people say because I don't want to think about it. No, not that kind. But an active faith from childhood, a conviction that no, God is there. And I've known many such people, West and East. That's a very good thing. But the person who doesn't believe because they are thoughtful, that also is a good thing. I would say, naturally, because of my avocation, my own belief, that in time they will come to accept the reality of spiritual values because they are real, they are true. But people who have rejected religion because they are thoughtful, then they are finding their way towards truth. And they may find it through a long period or even a whole lifetime of rejection of religion. But in time, because what they are really looking for is truth, then they are on the right path. So that's not a bad thing. What is to be limited, because their growth will take a long, long time, is the people who, or are the people who just don't care about spiritual things and don't want to think about it because it's who wants to bother with all of that stuff. For them, it will take a long time before spiritual consciousness is awakened. So, and another thing about faith that's very important is everybody has faith. And that's why he says here, the faith of all creatures is formed in accordance with their internal organ. The person is made of faith as the dominant factor. That's true of everyone. Whichever faith he has, he is verily that. Everybody has faith. Everybody exercises faith. So not faith in God, not faith in religion, but everyone has faith in something. People came this evening to those of you who are watching this class. You turned it on because you expected it to be here. You had the faith that we would have the class tonight. I have to tell you that you don't know how close you came to not having the class tonight. Suren Rastogi came 10 minutes before the class to set up for the video, and I had forgotten completely about it. If he had not been assigned to come take care of the video, if it had been dependent on me to do everything as it was some months ago, I had completely forgotten there was a class tonight. And so your faith would have been belied. But you exercise faith all of the time. You turn on the video because you have faith that it's going to be there. You come to the temple with the faith that it's going to be there. You step outside of your house with the faith that the sidewalk is going to hold your weight. You get in the car with the faith that it's going to drive. You breathe with the faith that air is going to be there for you to breathe. And so everything that we do is based on faith. Everyone has faith in something. All of us have faith in the basic functioning of the world around us. One form of insanity is when we begin to lose that faith and it looks like there's nothing in the world that can be trusted. Nothing can be taken for granted. Everything is beginning to dissolve into chaos, into confusion, into paranoia, into fears, and so forth. So short of that, all of us have faith in something. And so what Sri Krishna is saying, that is, the faith that you have, that determines who you are. If all you have faith in is the value of sense enjoyment, enjoying the senses, having a good time, not worrying about anything, just having a good time, floating on the surface of life, that's one type of faith. Yes, that's a faith. And that will determine who you are. If you have faith in the value of hard work, and so you put forth hard work and you try to excel, you try to get ahead in life and so forth, then that will tell who you are. That will make you who you are. If you have faith in religion, then that also will make you who you are, depending on what kind of faith that is in religion, whether it's just verbal faith or whether it's a living, a vital faith, and whether it's in the higher principles or just in the ordinary social practices, the rituals and things of the tradition. So whatever your faith, that is who you become. And that's the meaning of that English statement I said earlier, that was the title of a small book I used to see in the Chicago Vedanta Society library, As a Man Thinketh. So then we come to verse 4. Yajante sattvika devan yaksha rakshamsi rajasaha pretan bhuta ganamschanye yajante tamasa janaha. So here in this verse, he's talking about the people who are tamasic, that is, people who are whose lives are dominated by tamas. Again, the dark quality of ignorance, the destructive quality, the quality of inertia, of laziness, of darkness, of sleepiness, etc. So yajante sattvika, he tells all three. I was focusing just on the end. So at the beginning, he says, Yajante Sattvika Devan. Sattvic people, they worship the gods. And so here it means the higher gods, not the gods of Hinduism or God of the Abrahamic traditions, God of the Jews, Christians, and Muslims, Allah and God, and etc. Or the gods of Hinduism, who are different personalities of the one reality. So it's those gods that is meant here. So those having sattva quality worship the gods. Yaksha rakshamsi rajasaha. And those who are rajasic, they worship the yakshas and the rakshasas. That is the beings of power. That is sort of the powerful forces, the lower beings who are powerful, who can by worshiping them, you can get wealth and power and influence over others and so forth. So those who are rajasic, because what the rajasic person worships most is power. And so they worship these lower beings in order to gain power. Now, of course, that has to be understood in a broad sense, not just in the exact literal meaning of the verse, because in traditions, for instance, like the Abrahamic traditions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, nobody worships the demons. So does that mean they don't have any Rajasic people? No, of course not. They're predominated by Rajasic people as in other religions. But they worship God for what God can do for them. They worship God for what God can do for them. They're always making offerings and so forth in order to get things. They pay for a mass. They pay for some other thing in order to get something back from God. So they worship God as a cosmic vending machine, who you make your offering and you expect something back from God. And if you don't get it back from God, then you lose belief in God. God doesn't really exist because I wanted a new car and he didn't give me a new car. So what kind of God is that? So the Rajasic, they worship power beings. And then, Pretan Bhuta Ganans Chanye Yajante Tamasa Janaha. The Tamasic people, they worship ghosts and lower beings. So the Rakshasas and the Yakshas, Yakshas means like in Hindu mythology, it includes people like Kubera. Kubera, who is the god of wealth. He's not a god of wealth in the high sense. Nobody worships Kubera as God. They worship Kubera as the lord of wealth in a lower sense. And so he is a yaksha. And Kamadeva and such people, the god of romantic love and of lust. Such beings are lower deities, more like the titans of Western mythology and so forth. And so that's the type of people that the Rajasic people worship. But the Tamasic people, they actually worship lower beings. So the Rajasic, though it says Rakshasas, the Rakshasas, remember in Hinduism, they were not always, they're not equivalent to demons in Western religious thought. They're not completely evil. They're lower beings who have lower than the gods, but they have great power. In fact, there's stories in the Puranas, mythological stories, we're not talking history here, of when the Rakshasas or the Asuras, they conquered the whole universe. They outdid the gods. They took over the universe from the gods. And so these are powerful beings. And again, that's mythology, but the idea is that there are these powerful forces who have personified form, who can be approached and who can give to us, just as God in the Abrahamic traditions can be approached as just as an ordinary boon giver in order to get the things that you want. And then the Tamasic people are those who actually worship very low beings, destructive beings like ghosts and so forth. So those having sattva quality worship the gods, the higher gods, God as the personalities of the Absolute, Shiva, Vishnu, Krishna, Rama. Those having rajas, the demigods and the ogres, meaning the rakshasas, the powerful beings. And other people who are possessed of tamas worship ghosts and the hosts of spirits, lower spirits. So the next two verses go together. They form one sentence. And so I'm going to stop here. We'll begin next time with verse 5. And so if you have any questions, because we're stopping a little early, so there's plenty of time if you have questions. And then next time we will take up where we left off. So let me give announcements, and then I will take, if there are any questions, I'll take them. So the announcements: on Thursday, we will have the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna class as usual at 11 o'clock in the morning. On Sunday, I will be giving a lecture, but I forget what topic I gave for Sunday, so I can't tell you. But there will be a lecture at Sunday at the usual time, 11. And let me make a special announcement, and that is that we sent out a flyer at my request. A flyer was sent out that we would have Holy Mother's birthday celebration on December 22nd, which is her birthday according to the solar calendar. That is, according to the Western solar calendar. She was born in 1853 on December 22nd. And so we were going to have her worship on December 22nd, year to year. But we realized that this December 22nd is Tuesday, and many years, a majority of years, it will fall on a weekday when people are working and people can't participate in the worship. So we've decided to move Holy Mother's birth celebration observance to January 1st. And that we plan to keep from year to year. So January 1st, when people are free, and many people come to the temple anyway on January 1st for Kalpataru Day, we will combine Holy Mother's worship and adoration with Kalpataru Day. So it'll be a joint celebration on January 1st, not on December 22nd. We'll send out a flyer about that in a matter of days, but just so that you know. So Regina asks, do you like us to say hello here? Oh, yes, that's fine. That's fine to say hello. Yes, that's fine. Okay, and then Jack asks, if the body represents tamas, mind represents sattva, what is then rajas? Isn't deep faith a blind belief? Okay, good questions. So yes, when I say that the body is tamas and the mind is sattva, the body has its sattvic aspects, its rajasic aspects, and its tamasic aspects. But I said tamas very loosely because in comparison with the mind sometimes is very rajasic. When the mind is spinning around, we can't calm it down, and all sorts of thoughts popping up, then the mind is rajasic. When we start feeling sleepy and the mind stops working, we say, okay, I've had enough for today, then the mind is in a tamasic state. And when the mind is calm and collected, it's sattvic. But compared to the body, the mind is more sattvic because it's the seat of intelligence. So in comparison, the mind is more sattvic. In comparison to that, the body is more tamasic. And so the question about what about rajas? Oh, it's not that the body is just tamas and the mind is just sattva. The mind has the three gunas, the body has the three. And so you could, however, say, recognizing that this is a very limited statement and should not be taken cut and dried or absolute, that the prana, the vital force, which mediates between the body and mind, that which animates the body and mind, that is rajasic. But again, the prana can be more sattvic, more rajasic, or more tamasic. But in itself, it tends to be rajas because it's that which, it's energy itself, that which promotes activity. The body is sort of stable. It's not very intelligent in itself. Yes, the body has its own intelligence, but it's not clear and luminous as the mind can be. So the mind is more, compared to the other two, the mind is more sattvic. Compared to the other two, the prana is more rajasic. And compared to the other two, the body is more tamasic. And then about a deep faith, a blind belief. No, that's a good question, but we have to make a distinction. Blind belief means I'm believing in something just because without good cause. I'm believing it just because I'm going to believe in it, or because people told me to believe in it. I don't know why. I haven't thought about it, but I don't need to think about it. People have told me that God exists, and so that's true. So blind belief means an unexamined faith. But a true faith is that which comes from reflection. That doesn't mean you have to be philosophical, because some people are by nature not philosophical. Some people are not abstract thinkers. They're not conceptual. They're much more concrete thinkers and so forth, and that's fine. They can become spiritual as well as a philosophical person. But a faith which comes with a strong orientation, which orients your whole being towards something like the existence of God. That is quite different from a blind faith. Blind faith is based on stubbornness and an unwillingness to think about things. An active faith is that which is sure of where it is going because it has an intuition, or it has examined the issues and it has determined that no, this is true. So that's the difference between a deep faith and a blind faith. How does one get deep faith? As I said, some people are just born with the deep faith, and it's not out of stubbornness, but they don't even, the question, they may know the question, of course. They know the question, does God exist? But for them, it's not a question, because they have a deep sense of the existence of God. They have a feeling for it. Just as we have a feeling for air, we don't see the air, and yet I know that air is there. So people who have a deep faith in God, or a person may meet a very saintly person and see that this person is not like anyone I have ever met. They have something which no one else I've ever met has, something that I want, something that I see is deeply, their whole life is oriented towards something deeper and meaningful. And I don't see what that is, but I see that they have it, and I want that. And so what they tell me about God, I take with great faith, because I see that they're different from ordinary people in the very quality of their being and in their dedication to truth. That they tell me that whatever they tell me, they speak the truth. That is real living faith. Was Rabindranath Tagore, he has the beautiful statement that faith is the early morning bird who begins to sing before the first light of the sun is seen. That is, the early morning bird who knows that the sun is about to rise. There's not yet even a glimmer of sun on the horizon, and yet the bird knows that it's time now. Any moment now, the light is going to show itself. And so faith is like that early morning bird. The person who knows that is convinced. They don't need to argue anymore. They're beyond the stage of arguing and trying to figure it out. They know that spirit is real. And now it's just waiting for the vision of that. So then Subhash, faith is a literal translation of Shraddha, but it means much more than that, right? No. And I say no. It's a good question, Subhash, a good question. I'm not making fun of your question at all. It's a very good question. But faith in English means a whole variety of things. As Jack asked in his question, it often is meant to use blind faith. Or for people who don't believe in religion, all faith is blind faith, and faith is something silly. Or there's the faith of the great saint, whose faith is a living faith because they've seen the living God. And they know that God exists. So even when that vision of God disappears, the faith is a living faith. And so faith is a word. It can be used any way you like. And Shraddha is a word also. Shraddha can be used in a low sense, and Shraddha can be used in a high sense. And so I know it's very popular, and in fact, some people nowadays are saying things that can't be translated from from Sanskrit to English. Yes, there's some things that don't exactly translate, but many things like this, they do translate. It's just that we have to explain them, whether we use the English word or we use the Sanskrit word. It's not as mysterious as some people are trying to make out the untranslatables. And then, Simanti, can you please elaborate on tamasic faith with example? Yes, the tamasic faith is that sort of faith that I said of a person who is too lazy to think about things. And so they just, well, I know I don't want to enter into politics, and so I will try to skirt around the topic, but just by pointing or indicating that there are many people today who believe anything that they're told. That's tamasic faith. That some idiot tells them something, and they say that he's our idiot, and so we believe what he says. And so that is tamasic faith. And then Anil, Aptavakya. Yes, Aptavakya means the saying of one who has attained, Apta, one who has realized the highest truth. So their words become scripture. That is, their words, because they're speaking of what they're actually experiencing. They've seen the highest truth. They've known it in direct experience. And so their words are called Aptavakya, the sayings of the ones who have attained. And so their words carry special weight. And if we're fortunate enough to hear the words of such a person, then it drives deep faith into us. Don't think that that is easily come by. Such people are rare. Many of us are spiritual aspirants who may have risen to a certain level of spirituality. But to be a person who speaks from direct transcendental experience of the highest reality, who's known the highest truth, that is very rare. There are always such people, but it's hard to find them. It's hard, even if we find them, we won't know who they are. But such people, many such people have become known through time, whether while they're still alive or after they've passed away through the written record or the oral tradition. There are always such people, and their words carry tremendous faith. So if you read the words of a Ramakrishna, if you read the words of a Holy Mother Vivekananda, you read the words of a Ramana Maharshi, you read the statements in the Ashtavakra Samhita, or Narada Bhakti Sutras, and so forth, then you're reading the words of Aptavakyas, those who have attained to the highest. So, okay, then I'll do this quickly because we're already out of time. Do the tamasic mind move gradually towards rajasic and sattvic? What forces the movement? Is there will necessary or by grace? How do we know? Yes, everyone who is in a tamasic state of mind now, or of a tamasic frame of life or faith, in time they will become awakened. So the progress is from tamas to rajas and rajas to sattva. And so if we become aware of this idea and we want to rise higher, then we begin to learn what is a sattvic state like, and seeing that I don't have that. That's what I want. I see the value of it. I want it. And so then I start trying to approximate it. If I find myself in deep state of tamas, then I try first to stimulate myself to activity. Doing something, as Swami Vivekananda said, even doing something wrong is better than doing nothing. Even doing something criminal, he said, is better than being so lazy you don't do anything. So as he said, he was not promoting criminality, but he was saying that doing something, even something bad, is better than doing nothing. And so rise to rajas, but then realize that is not an end in itself. That's full of action and reaction and turmoil and suffering and everything. So then you try to rise to sattva. How do we know we are in a tamasic or tamas phase? Just by understanding from the scriptures. So Okay, so we'll stop here. I've given announcements, so now a closing chant. Om Yam Brahma Varunendra Rudra Marutastun Vandi Divyaistavaihi Vedai Sangapada Kramopanishadair Gayanti Yam Samagaha Dhyanavastita Tadgatena Manasa Pashyanti Yam Yogino Yasyandam Navidusura Suragana Devaya Tasmai Namaha. We bow to that Supreme Being whom Brahma and other gods praise with divine hymns, whose glories the singers of the Sama hymns sing through the Vedas and Upanishads, whom the yogis see with their minds absorbed in that through meditation, and whose end and beginning neither the gods nor demigods know. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Om Peace, peace, peace be unto us all.